You know, we all wrestle with life big questions, right? Usually in the quiet of our own minds. But what if the universe answered back? And what if it answered with geometry? Today, we're diving into that very idea. And it all starts not with some abstract theory, but with a deeply personal story. A story of loss and a truly impossible encounter.
Now, this experience, it's described not as a memory, but as a living presence. And that right there, that sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about. See, this wasn't some comforting vision, it was something else entirely. It blew the doors open to a whole series of deep, urgent questions, and the very first one is maybe the most mysterious of all.
So here's the question. Why does geometry seem to show up at the very edge of human experience? Because after that encounter, a search for answers began, and this wild pattern started to emerge. Across cultures, all through history, people report seeing these geometric forms during huge, life-altering moments. So the question isn't, are they real? That kind of misses the point. The real question is, what are they for? What are they doing there?
All right, to get our heads around that, we've got to go back. We need to look at our ancient relationship with geometry itself. And believe it or not, it didn't start as some mystical, abstract idea. Nope, it began as a totally practical, brilliant tool for making order out of pure chaos.
I mean, just look at how this whole thing evolved. It started out as a survival tool, plain and simple. In ancient Egypt, you had these rope stretchers, right? Their whole job was to use these basic geometric principles to redraw property lines after the Nile flooded everything every single year. Talk about creating order from chaos. Then in Mesopotamia, they used it to build entire cities. But then, something really interesting happened. The Greeks, guys like Pythagoras and Plato, they started to ask a different question. Not how does it work, but why does it work? And they came up with this radical idea. Maybe this tool we're using to measure fields is actually showing us the blueprint of the entire cosmos.
So this is the pivot point, right here. You can see this huge shift in thinking. Geometry goes from being a tool we use to force order on a messy world to being seen as a kind of sacred language that reveals an order that was already there. It's the difference between building a fence and discovering the laws of physics. One is about imposing your will, the other is about understanding the fundamental nature of reality.
And the Pythagoreans? Well, they took this idea and ran with it. I mean, they took it to its most extreme logical conclusion. For them, reality itself was math. The universe wasn't just measurable, it was number. Think about that. They believed the same simple ratios that create harmony in music were the very same ones that govern the orbits of the planets. They called it cosmic harmonia, this beautiful, perfectly ordered symphony where everything fits together. And geometry? That was the sheet music.
Okay, so Plato takes this foundation and builds something incredible on top of it. In his famous work, the Timaeus, he basically says the fundamental elements of our world, fire, earth, air, water, they aren't just random messy stuff. No way! He said they're actually built from these 5 perfect geometric shapes. Fire, for example, is made of tiny, sharp tetrahedrons. Earth is made of stable cubes. It's this mind-blowing idea that the very atoms of reality have a kind of geometric intelligence built right into them.
So, with all that history in our back pocket, geometry as a tool, geometry as a language, we finally get to this one single, incredibly powerful diagram that seems to bundle all of that ancient wisdom into one shape. And that is Metatron's cube.
Now, the cool thing about Metatron's cube is you don't just draw it out of thin air. It's revealed. It's hiding inside another pattern. So you start with the ancient flower of life, right? This pattern of overlapping circles. Then you focus in on just the 13 circles at its heart. That's called the fruit of life. And here's the magic step. You simply draw a straight line connecting the center of every circle to the center of every other circle. And when you do that, bam! This hidden, super complex architecture just appears. It's not about creating something new. It's about discovering the order that was already there.
Okay, and this is the kicker. This is what's so mind-blowing about it. Within that one single diagram, you can find 2-dimensional versions of all 5 of those Platonic solids we just talked about. The building blocks of creation, according to Plato, are all packed into this one figure. So it's not just a pretty pattern. It's like a visual library, an archive of the fundamental blueprints of the universe.
And that gets us to its core function. It's what we call a mediating architecture. That sounds fancy, but think of it like this. It's a mental filing cabinet. It's a visual container that lets your mind hold on to a really complex idea or maybe an overwhelming experience without completely short-circuiting. It gives structure to something that feels chaotic. It basically helps you organize the unorganizable.
So that name,
Metatron. Why that name? This is where the story takes another fascinating turn. Because the name isn't just a label for a drawing. It actually points us to this ancient figure from Jewish mysticism, who is, essentially, the living embodiment of this whole idea of mediation.
Yeah, so in the Bible, there's this patriarch named Enoch, and his story is super short and really weird. It just says he walked with God, and then he was gone because God took him. He's the guy who doesn't die. So later, mystical traditions really ran with this and said he was transformed, elevated into this supreme angel named Metatron, whose whole job was to be the bridge, the ultimate go-between for the divine world and our human one.
And what's his job description? Well, basically, he's the celestial scribe. His whole gig is to take this infinite, blindingly overwhelming divine knowledge and organize it, structure it, put it into a form that we humans can actually process without our brains melting. He doesn't just use a mediating architecture, he is a mediating architecture, in person.
I just love this idea. Think about it. The simple act of writing, of taking a chaotic flood of thoughts and organizing them into sentences and paragraphs. That's a kind of geometric act, isn't it? You're imposing a structure that makes the information navigable. Well, the scribe, Metatron, is doing that same exact thing, just on a cosmic scale.
And get this, the name itself might be a giant clue. Some scholars think Metatron comes from the Greek word mitron, which means to measure, or maybe the Latin metator, which means surveyor. So it brings us right back to those Egyptian rope stretchers, right? It's all about measuring, ordering, and structuring. It's just perfect. The scribe and the diagram, they're two sides of the same coin. They represent the same fundamental organizing intelligence.
Okay, so what's the point of all this? Why should we care about this ancient geometry in our modern lives? Well, it all comes down to one really important word: integration.
Look, we all go through these threshold experiences. Maybe it's a near-death experience, a moment of intense grief, a powerful spiritual insight, moments that can completely shatter your view of reality. A structure like Metatron's cube, then, acts like a kind of scaffolding for the soul. It gives you a stable framework to hang that overwhelming memory on so you can start to make sense of it and weave it back into your life, but in a new, transformed way.
So the source material for all of this actually lays out a 4-step model for what this geometry is doing. It's not just a passive symbol you look at. First, it acts as a guardian. It protects you from being completely fried by the experience. Second, it mediates. It translates the raw data into a form you can actually handle. Third, it structures the whole thing, giving the memory a coherent shape. And finally, number 4, it helps you with integration, weaving it all back into the fabric of a new and transformed life.
And this, for me, is the most important takeaway of all. This whole architecture, this geometry, its purpose isn't to give you a tidy little answer that explains away the mystery. Not at all. Its real job is to help you come back to your everyday life, not with a bunch of satisfied conclusions, but with a sharpened attention, more awake, more aware than you were before the experience.
So you see, this ancient idea isn't just some dusty piece of history. It's a living question for every single one of us. When you face your own personal thresholds, those moments of chaos or loss or a sudden overwhelming insight, what are the structures that you lean on? What are the things, whether they're geometric or relational or symbolic, that help you navigate those moments and find your way back?